Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview. I'm Andrew Musgrove and as usual joined by John Gibson. We're live on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter and later on our podcast channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, give us a little subscribe and the same as well on that podcast channel. I'm sure you guys don't need reminding. Newcastle face Liverpool on Saturday up at St James's Park. In a big game, Newcastle really need to get back to winning ways, even though they remain unbeaten in 17. Of course, the last defeat, John, was to Liverpool way back in August, which is, first off, that sentence itself, the last time Newcastle were defeated in the Premier League was back in August, is an absolutely astonishing one, isn't it?
Oh, well, it's the only time they've been beaten in the league this season. And there's no other side in the Premier League can say that they've only lost one league game this season. So you look at it from that point of view, and it's absolutely fabulous. You look at it from the other point of view of having 5 draws out the last 6, and with Wembley coming up, you suddenly go all twitchy. But it shows how far we've come that we are all twitchy, and we must never lose sight of the fact where we've come from, because it's very easy to do that, in the current run of dropping points. But it's been phenomenal all season.
Well, that's been the big debate, hasn't it, over the past few days? And we had Damien Spellman of the PA on the podcast on Monday. And one of the questions I put to him, John, was about perspective, because the result on over the weekend against Bournemouth wasn't a good result in terms of where Newcastle are, where Bournemouth are. But a lot of people said, well, actually, let's remember how far we've come, where we were this time last season. Do you agree with that sentiment, that it's all about remembering how far we've come?
I do. Absolutely. Having said that, you naturally are so ambitious because it's your club, and Eddie Howe's so ambitious, and I'm certain all the players and the board are, that it's only natural that you want the foot to go back on the gas and for us to go. It's much because the club, the way it's constructed now, deserve this to be a terrific season. Deserve us to make either the Champions League, certainly Europe, if at all possible, win the cup final. We deserve that. So, we've got to remember where we've come from. We've got to be grateful, but that doesn't mean that you can't be ambitious, because as we've said many times on this program, shy Ben's getting out. So we've got to keep going, got to drive for that bit extra, got to look to turn draws into wins, because 5 draws out of 6, and if you're harsh, and when you're up at the top end of the league, it is harsh, life is harsh. If you're harsh, there's only one of those draws where we say, wow, wasn't that fabulous? And that was the draw with Arsenal. The rest of the draws are against sides which are very average, whether they're Leeds, whether they're West Ham, whether they're Bournemouth, they aren't quality sides. We're meeting 3 big beasts on the bounce now in Liverpool, Man United, and Man City. So that'll give us a good idea how the whole season's going to pan out. But however it pans out, it's been marvellous and it's been wonderful. But we don't want it to sort of go out with a little bit of a whimper, like, you finish 7th and you haven't won in the cup final. That would be a shame.
What was your initial reaction at full time on Saturday against Bournemouth? And after a couple of days reflection, after, it's about 4 days after now, has your initial view changed, or has it remained the same?
It hasn't changed. I mean, yes, the emphasis, your first reaction when the whistle goes, oh, darn it, that's 2 points dropped. Twice this season, we've only drawn 1-1 with Bournemouth in second bottom of the league. So your first reaction, and you know what my reaction is when I look back, each match that's gone recently has happened, but a concern because we look leggy. And, you wonder what's going to stop us being leggy in time for Wembley, for example. We've only got one more outing in time for Wembley. We've looked leggy. We've looked off the pace of what we've set early in the season. Newcastle have been very much a front foot, closing down rapidly type of side. Can you keep that going for 12 months? It's interesting that sides, don't. If you look at the top 5 now, I would suggest that 3 of the 5 are finding it harder now than they did. Arsenal have not won in their last 3 games, if you include Cup as well as League. Arsenal play Wednesday night against Man City, and they haven't won in the last 3. Newcastle have drawn 5 out of 6, and we're still 4th because every time Spurs get a good result, they then go and get a very bad result. And that has kept us in 4th place. 3 of the sides, there's only Man U and Man City, and they've had a tiny wobble, but they're the only 2 that you feel are relatively consistent at the moment out of the top 5, which is very, very interesting.
But does that make it even more frustrating, that point against Bournemouth, that it was a missed opportunity in many ways, and with Spurs obviously, as you say, not having the best of times, or do we need to look at it the bigger picture from Newcastle's point of view, just to be in that conversation?
Because we care, we're bound to look at it that it's a missed opportunity. Eddie Howe will be sitting in his office saying that was a damn missed opportunity, but got the points there. He might politically say the right thing in public because he's very level-headed, but he's a very ambitious man, and like us all. Bournemouth was a missed opportunity, but you're not telling me that Leeds at home wasn't a missed opportunity, or West Ham at home wasn't a missed opportunity. Yes, they were missed opportunities as well, and that is what's worrying us. They're consistently missed opportunities. It particularly worries you, Andrew, when a cup final's coming along, because you don't get a second bite at the cup final. It's an on-the-day result. And if we play like we have in the 5 draws out of 6, Arsenal aside, then there's no revisiting the final and say, let's play it again in 3 weeks when we're feeling that much better. You can't do it. So we're very, very anxious. But Wharton to get carried away, I mean, you can still set up. We love all these stats, one that can prove absolutely anything you want them to prove. I mean, 5 draws out of 6 proves that Newcastle are labouring a little bit. 1 defeat in 22 would suggest they're flying. So it just depends which set of stats you want to look at. I think the reality is that we're still a very difficult side to beat. We're still having an unbelievable season, but by no means are we as consistently vibrant as we were before the World Cup, for example.
Well, this is one of the questions we've got in the comments, and a lot of people have actually said similar things, but I'll put Roger's question to you, John. Due to continuity of our main team, are we starting to look jaded, as has been suggested? You've said yes. I would just add to that from Roger. I mean, what can Eddie Howe really do? Because he hasn't got too many options.
That's the great difficulty. That is the great difficulty. I found it very interesting the other day, and I know you like stats, and I know you always say to me, Andrew, that I don't, but they're interesting. And the 2 stats the other day showed that the 2 teams that have changed their starting lineup the fewest times this season are 1 Arsenal and 2 us. And at the moment, people are saying that those are the 2 teams in danger of fading a little bit. There's concern down at Arsenal that they haven't won in 3. They've got Man City, which is tough. They might just not get the title, it's been suggested, because they're not as vibrant as they were. That has been levelled at us as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, this was Newcastle's 11th draw of the Premier League campaign. Only Reims over in France have drawn more, which is 12. And actually, Newcastle have drawn more games this season than they did last season, which was 10. And sticking with the stats, John, 4 of the last 8 Premier League goals that Newcastle have conceded have been from corners, including 3 of the last 4. Is that something to worry about? Because, they switched off against Bournemouth, they switched off against West Ham, similar goals.
It is.
Yeah.
Because Andrew, we're not scoring enough goals to be able to say, well, we're 3-0 up at the time, so it's just 3-1 now. Nasty. But these are goals that are costing us points, as well as the chances we're missing are costing us points. So are these. And, it's almost criminal in the world of football. The most criminal thing you can do is conceded a set piece because you've got time to mark up. You have time to mark up. In each of the last 2 goals that we've conceded have come from a corner that's been flicked on at the near post over the head of big defenders in the centre of the goal, be that Byrne or Joe Linton or whatever, and a guy at the back post has been unmarked. The West Ham guy was unmarked, and so was the Bournemouth guy, and they have time to stick it away. Now, Trippier lost his man at the front post, was big enough to admit it. Isaac lost his man at the back post. Isaac was supposed to be marking up the centre-half that's equalised. He was standing, if you watch it again, he was standing with the centre-half when they started to take the kick, and the centre-half moved on the kick about to come over, and Isaac just stayed where he was. Now, I'm not having a particularly critical time about Isaac and about Trippier. I mean, what Trippier gives us to him. But they lost him in. I mean, Kieran said so, and it was very forthright afterwards and said, I lost my man.
Yeah, well, I've got the quote here from Kieran Trippier, and he was speaking to Sky Sports just after, and he said, and I quote, I think we did well in certain moments. Bournemouth are good on the transition. They defend well and break forward, and we have to be aware of that. This is a tough place to come, and the most important thing is that we don't get beat, and it is another point that could be massive come the end. Didn't start strong. We knew Bournemouth would come out of the traps quick. They are at home. Overall, we are happy, but we have so much to work on. I lost my man for the goal. It's not like us, but it is sloppy, myself included. We have to go again. We get ready for another game next week. And that's what I take from that, John, is the bit where he says we didn't start strong. They do look like they've lost a little yard of pace, and that probably comes down to the fatigue issue because they've started the season so well. They've been on teams, they've pressed them. Inevitably, they're going to get tired with a lack of additions in January. That probably hasn't helped the situation either.
I mean, Wood went out in January and Shelby went out in January, and we didn't bring in a centre forward or a midfield player. Now, this game with Liverpool, and no doubt you'll be talking about the team later on, but this game with Liverpool, we could be in trouble in the middle of the park because we haven't got Bruno. And it looks like we won't have Willock. Willock will concentrate totally on trying to make the final, and that might be iffy. So that's going to leave you with Joe Linton, Longstaff, and who? Now, the answer to that is it's either Elliot Anderson or you rejig slightly what happens further up the park and put Anthony Gordon in. And by the way, one reason why we're not having a go at Trippier, and he was man enough to stand up and say, I lost the man I was supposed to be marking. May we say right now, Andrew, thank you very much, Trips, because if he hadn't kicked the ball off the line in the last minute, we would be looking at our second league defeat of the season. He has a huge heart and a little body, and he's done terrific for us, and a mistake is made. But you know what? I look at the thing, Andrew, and I don't know what your feelings were about it. I think it was a match too far for Dan Burn. He showed what we're talking about. Players that are getting leggy, players where it's catching up with them, players whose form's dipped a little bit more than it used to be. Dan Burn epitomised that for me against Bournemouth. I mean, he was awful. He looked like a big centre-half playing left-back, which he hasn't looked in recent time. That's what worried me when he went to left back. But he's done terrific. But he's struggled something awful at Bournemouth. Now he's got Liverpool to get that out of his system. And then he's got Wembley, and we don't want him struggling at Wembley. We don't want anybody struggling at Wembley. But a few players have not looked what they were. I mean, dare I say that Bachmann ever so slightly is dropped in standard. Willock is dropped in standard. There's a few and it just takes 10% to go off your game, be it mental tiredness or whatever. And it's different. The size of the squad is the worry, because all you've got around of any experience that didn't start at Bournemouth is Isaac and Gordon. If you look at the rest of the bench, you're wondering what he can do in any situation. You've got Murphy there, but Murphy is the habitual sub, isn't he, that comes on any time from 75 minutes onwards. So there is a terrible lack. And ironically, as we look at the Liverpool, where we're getting exposed because of injuries, midfield and up front. That's where we're struggling, with Almiron and Maxi and Wilson all having to prove their fitness this week. And I think they'll all be fit and take part, incidentally, but we have had that problem with them. And Willock and Bruno in midfield were short midfield and up top.
Yeah, I mean, the two concerns and two conclusions I think everyone took from the January window about the lack of depth up front and in the midfield. It's just unfortunate that those concerns have become a reality with the injuries and suspensions. Hopefully Wilson will be back for Liverpool, but we don't know that for certain. Almiron looks like there's been reports he hasn't actually broken his hand, so he should be all right. Max, he's got bruising apparently, getting a report by the Telegraph around the knee, nothing too serious. Willock is a little bit more serious reportedly, and as you said, John, will be in a race to be fit for the final.
I think the other three guys will be fine. Certainly Miggy will be, because he runs all day. It was a wrist injury, and as long as that's not broken, you're okay. Miggy, bless him, sometimes looks like the invisible man. He's that much bandaged up, and I think he likes a bit of drama after the game, but he likes to come off looking a bit agonizingly injured, and then he's okay again. Callum Wilson should be fit. Though with Callum Wilson, I tell you, mate, we never know till the team sheet comes out with Callum. I mean, we had absolutely no forewarning of anything being wrong last week until there was the team sheet and he wasn't on it. And this is the one thing that stops him being a great centre forward, isn't it? You live match to match with Callum. You don't know if he's going to be there. And it's said that he'll be there this week, and I expect him to be there this week. But until I get the team sheet an hour before kickoff, I'm never 100% certain on Callum at all. So there are concerns, but thankfully Bruno will be back at Wembley, which will help, because Willock may not be at Wembley. We haven't had much of an update, but I think we will never see Willock, I think, against Liverpool. You're not going to risk him with a bit of a hammy when the cup final's 1 week away, are you? I don't think we'll see him at all on Saturday.
And just on Miguel Almiron, I did say he was going to score against Bournemouth, just in case
you did.
I did say that. And in the final, so one half of that prediction's come true.
He might mind. I hope he gives half his draw bonus to Sean Longstaff for that terrific shot that allowed him to tuck it in. I was delighted for him because he needed that. He needed it because it stopped scoring in the same way as Wilson needed the previous week to score. But, we've been talking earlier, Andrew, about, will we be disappointed at the end of the season if we've tapered off a little bit? I think, being serious for a minute, and we have a lot of jokes about Mickey, but being serious for a minute, I think judging them all individually and the team collectively, we've got to wait till the end of the season to do that, in fairness, because the next 3 games are huge. If we're going to get a Champions League place, we've got to return to winning ways against Liverpool. The final is, of course, huge. We're first final for 24 years. And then we'll come back to get points, and it's away Man City, who could be top of the league by then. So the next 3 games are going to be huge and will decide in what direction we're going. And we've just got to wait and see what comes out the other end.
Yeah, most certainly. We've got loads of comments coming in, John. So I'll I'll ask you this one from Christian.
Yes.
8 points in the last 6 games due to all the draws. 3 wins, 3 losses would be 9 points. Are we too defensive, and do we take too little risk to win games?
Good question, because yes, we're searching for reasons as to why this is happening. I don't think we are defensive, you know. I think we've just stopped knowing how to score goals. We miss chances in quite a lot. Bournemouth was probably a game where we didn't have as many as we normally have. But I mean, Wilson, who scored against West Ham, missed a hat trick. He got one and should have had 2 others. He could have had a hat trick. We've stopped scoring goals. Then what happens? The minute a reliable defence, the best in the league, makes a rick, as they did against West Ham, as they did against Bournemouth, it's a draw instead of a win. And we're just too leggy, and we can't mix it about. I mean, if you look at Man City, they can put 2 separate teams out, if 2 different 11s, and still look as strong as they did initially. I mean, you know, you get Haaland going off, who's the biggest goal machine in the Premier League. The other night, you get Haaland coming off, and who comes on from the subs bench? Alvarez has just won the World Cup with Argentina. I mean, that's the sort of squads there. De Bruyne sits on the bench when he's not injured on occasions. Can you imagine us putting Bruno on the bench just when he was absolutely fully fit and playing somebody else? We haven't the strength and depth, and it is really shown now. It is really, really shown. For me, we've got probably 11 players that start, and I had Isaac and Gordon, and that's about it. That's about it, and that's nowhere near enough. And you can't. How do you freshen up the team apart from using those 2 players?
You can't really, but you know, as we've discussed previously, it might be a good chance to give Anderson a go in midfield, and he might be forced to with these injuries as well. Again, we expect the players to be back in, but we haven't had it confirmed, and we know that Eddie sometimes says one thing and another thing ends up being the result on the team sheet. I'm going to ask this question, John. I wouldn't get you answer first, but I'm going to say I don't think. Well, the question is, with the cup final coming up next Sunday, sorry, will Eddie Howe's team be impacted by that? I don't think. Do you think it will? No,
absolutely not.
No, I think he'll be playing his strongest team possible to get 3 points against Liverpool.
He's got to. Is he going to gamble everything on getting a result in the cup final? If you're mid-table, you can leave people out the week before the cup final, and a lot of teams would. And Joe Harvey certainly did that before the 74 cup final when we were mid-table. He left players out in the build-up to the cup final and then put them back in for the cup final. But I mean, what if, here's a theory, if he left some out this weekend, we didn't win as a consequence, and then we lost the cup final, so it didn't work that way. We've closed the door on both the cup final and Europe. There's absolutely no way. The only way that you would change the team with a cup final in mind is if you had a player that was a bit iffy, like Joe Willock, physically a bit iffy with an injury, not tiredness. Then you wouldn't risk. You wouldn't risk Joe Willock before a final when he's carrying a hamstring, because you could put him out for 6 weeks if you did that. Never mind just a cup final. And I don't. So outside of an unknown injury, and how many has there been of them recently? And hamstrings are very difficult. And Callum Wilson always suffers from hamstrings, and there was a hamstring evidently that kept him out at Bournemouth. But how much of a hamstring? Just a little niggle, and with him you dare not risk anything. Or is it still a problem this week? You don't know. But the only answer is you don't take risk for hamstring. If somebody's left out, like Willock, like Joe, like Callum Wilson, it'll be because they're physically carrying, not because they're being rested when 100% for the cup final. Absolutely not.
Graham says we could lose the next 3 and still finish 4th or even higher. Once swallowed doesn't make a summer. Patience is a virtue. We now have a club that is trying and a manager that gives a damn. Ian says, couldn't agree more. We're looking very leggy, thin squad exposed when you look at the bench with the likes of Manquillo and Ritchie there as options. And there's been quite a few
I
people,
tell you
John.
what, I like, sorry to put in, I like what Graham said there. Now, it's absolutely right. Let us not panic, etc., etc. But I don't think if we lose the next three, we'll finish fourth top, will we?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think if we lost three on the bounce, we'd still finish fourth top.
But maybe I think what Graham's maybe pointing out there again is that whole bigger picture argument about, well, if you finish 6th or 7th after where Newcastle have been for the past 14 years and you're in a League Cup final and
Yeah, I
potentially
know
winning it.
I know exactly what Graham's getting at. He's absolutely right. We've got to keep a sense of proportion. But I think the time to have a sense of proportion is at the end of the season when it's all over, all dusted. You're dusting down your trousers. You're going to think of your summer holidays and you say, hey, what do I think of the season? But I half enjoyed it. Yes, we didn't quite make this or we didn't quite do that, but it was wonderful. While it's on, you're naturally wanting to beat Liverpool. You're naturally wanting to win the cup. You're naturally wanting to get in the Champions League. And, that's just nature for your club. You're not being critical. You're being hopeful and you're wanting them to pull together and make it for all our sakes.
And we're talking about there, John, about potentially the impact of the League Cup final on the team selection for Newcastle against Liverpool. And plenty of people pointing out that Liverpool actually play Real Madrid Tuesday coming, and might Jurgen Klopp choose a team on Saturday which allows him to play a stronger team on Tuesday against Real Madrid, given they're 10 points off the top four, their form is not brilliant. I mean, they've only won one game this year in the Premier League.
It depends. What it depends on, I guess, is what attitude Klopp wants to take. If he feels that he can still make the top four with players coming back from injury like Jota and like the Van Dijk and etc., etc. If he thinks he can still make the top four because Newcastle and Spurs are dithering, then he's got to play his best side up at Newcastle to make the top four. If he wants to build on confidence, having beaten Everton, to have some confidence within the squad and within his supporters to play Real Madrid, then he's got to come up here and try to win. You can look at the theory and say from 9th and so far behind, you can secretly give up on the top part of the season and rest somebody. I just don't think Klopp will. I think he's had too many smackings this season. I think his away record in the Premier League this season is atrocious, and he'll want to change that. And I think he'll sniff a bit of blood with Newcastle, He'll think they're not the worried they were if I had been going up there before Christmas. This mightn't be a bad time to go to Newcastle.
But at the same time, isn't it nice to be, as a Newcastle fan reporter, to be coming into this game not fearing Liverpool and knowing that if you play your very best, then you probably are favourites to get a result.
Oh, if we hit, we are 9 points in 5 places above Liverpool. Who would have thought last summer we'd be saying that? Liverpool had just won the FA Cup, the League Cup, had finished second in the league, 1 point behind Man City, and had played Real Madrid in the Champions League final, which was only 1-0. So in 4 competitions, they won 2 and were second in the other 2. Who would have said that we would be going into February 5 places and 9 points ahead of Liverpool? It's incredible. And if they hadn't got the 3 points against us, we would be out of sight for them now. It is quite staggering, yes.
Even though they beat Everton in the Merseyside derby, did you see anything that really worried you? I know Salah back amongst the goals, but it comes down to what Newcastle can do, and that's how Eddie Howe approaches every game. Let's worry about us, not about them.
No, they don't. They didn't terrify me because of the way they played. I think there's more of a risk to us about the way Rashford's playing for the cup final than there is about Mo Salah or anybody at Liverpool for Saturday. I saw a Liverpool side who are better than Everton, but Everton are dreadful, winning 2-0 with Pickford deciding he'd go for a sandwich on the first goal. I mean, where was he? Away to the hot dog stand or what on the goal, you know? So, no, I saw nothing to make us fear at all. There's more to look at and nullify in the Man U side, isn't it? But we'll be talking about that next week.
Yeah, I mean, looking from the outside in at Liverpool, Klopp seems very agitated, very irritable. It looks like he's under a bit of pressure, whether that's pressure put on him by himself because his team are not doing what a Jurgen Klopp team usually does so far off the pace in the Champions League race, let alone the race for the Premier League title. And you know, he might look at the next two games and say, well, actually, our best chance is maybe winning the Champions League to secure Champions League football for next year.
Yeah, but well, yes, but do you want to go into the Champions League side? Haven't got your backside well smacked at Newcastle. I don't think that would do the fragile confidence of Anfield any help whatsoever. By the way, I hope he puts the reserves out, but you know, I would suspect that he wouldn't. But hey, let's get this right. If we play to the way we can, and we haven't done it for several games now, I've got to add, but if we did, we're better this season than they are. We would win. The one thing that worries us is that we're not playing the way we can, and we haven't for a considerable number of games.
Yeah, I totally agree. And fingers crossed, in front of a rocking St. James's Park, they can get back to winning ways. And we have to talk about that game at Anfield back in August. As we said at the start of the show, the only time Newcastle have been beaten in the Premier League this season, it was feisty. The two dugouts coming together. There was fingers being stuck up at each other, and a bit of a push and shove match. And you know, I suppose for the neutral, it was a brilliant game to watch. Do Newcastle have a feeling of they wanting to avenge what happened back in August?
I certainly hope so, because that's the sort of thing. The willingness, the drive to get revenge on Saturday, and the drive to win a cup final that Newcastle United have not appeared in for 24 years is what might just give them the extra incentive, might just make the adrenaline flow a little bit better, and might just produce a win instead of a draw. And so you've got to hope so. They've got a right to want revenge. Great managers like Ferguson used to live on revenge. Ferguson would have been talking all week about getting revenge because we were badly done to in the last game, 98th minute. Isaac wonder goal chalked out because his shadow was offside. Blah, 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 blah. He would have talked revenge all week. And I hope there's a feeling. I think Eddie Howe's more level-headed than that. But I would hope that each individual player is thinking, hey, let's put that record right. That was unjust. Let's put it right. And I hope to have a feeling that they want revenge, because I certainly want Newcastle to get revenge.
What do you think the team talk would be then from Eddie Howe? Do you think it will be largely focused on, right, this happened in August, we were very unlucky, we were hard done by, you know, they got in our faces that we didn't really like that very much in terms of, you know, everyone got a bit heated. What do you think the team talk is going to be if it is based on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I think he's going to, because he is who he is, he's going to do tactics and what he wants them to do. But I would finish before you walk out. It's what Joe Harvey used to do, and it's what Bobby Robson used to do, and it's what Keegan used to do, and it's certainly what Ferguson used to do, is wind them up and say, come on, lads, you remember Anfield, you remember it was an absolute disgrace. Isaac wasn't offside on that goal. It was 2 goals, 2 under goals on his debut. We were conned out of it. They pulled all the tricks about. They tried to dump on us by saying you were time wasting. You got what you deserved in the 98th minute because you were a bunch of time wasters. We don't accept that. We weren't doing that. We were professional. They were uppers. Didn't deserve the result. It's the only blemish on our record all season. Let's put that right. Let's erase that blemish. And it's not erased by getting a draw. It's erased by winning. So go out and do what you ought to do. Lift that crowd and send everybody down the A1 to London, full of the joys of the spring, looking for another victory down there. Do you know that winning the cup can be determined by what happens today against Liverpool? You beat Liverpool, and the fans and you will be believers again, and will march on London and will be able to do Man United. You lose up here and will want to leave at midnight for Liverpool to get out of the city, etc. We not only need revenge, but it will set the mood for victory at Wembley as well. There you are,
Gordon,
just done it for you.
there you go. I'm hoping that he's watching, taking note. Gordon says we can't show any respect to Liverpool at home. Get in their faces, hard, fast, pressure them. We can do it. We rattled them at Anfield. And yeah, the crowd are going to have a massive part to play. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be some atmosphere on Saturday. And I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be.
I mean, I'm wanting to see Klopp bog-eyed, lashing up and down the touchline, waving his arms frantically in the air, looking like an old Santa Claus with that grey beard that he's suddenly developed. I want to see that, because when I see that, I know it's all going wrong for Liverpool. So I want to see a lot of that. Certainly Eddie won't do anything like that, because Eddie doesn't. I mean, there's never a hair out of place with Eddie, and good for him. But Klopp has appeared something of a maniac recently this season. And isn't it wonderful to see? And I hope we'll see it for an hour and a half on Saturday, because it means he's getting his backside tanned.
And then somewhere else it's not quite going to plan is Tottenham as well, beating in the Champions League last night. And
well, Conte's another jack in the box, isn't he, that runs up and down and disappears up his own exterior.
He is, yeah. And beating Manchester City, it was a good performance, and then they lose 4-1 to Leicester. And they are chasing Newcastle down. Newcastle a couple of points ahead of them with a game in hand. But what I found really interesting was, prior to the game against AC Milan, was Antonio Conte's press conference. And I've got the clip here. I'll play you the clip, and then I'll get your views on it, John. But essentially, I've taken away from this clip that he basically throws his players a little bit under the bus and says they can't handle the pressure. And you'll hear him say they collapse all of a sudden. Let's play it, and then we'll get everyone's views on it.
Interested by your comment about stability and the difference between in England and Italy, bearing in mind that at Tottenham you have so many different nationalities. So why is there that difference that you talk about the lack of focus?
No, but I think sometimes also in my previous experience with Chelsea, no, and I feel that the pressure is different between Italy and England. In Italy, and you speak about football from Monday, and you finish on a Sunday, and you speak only football, and you have a lot of TV that speak football and put a lot of pressure, and you born in this way, and you grow in this way with this pressure, and you are used to live with this type of situation. In England, I think that there is an atmosphere that bring to enjoy football, and without a lot of pressure, and because football is a sport, and in Italy sometimes football is not only a sport, sometimes is a war between the teams, between the fans, and I think for this reason is the main difference about the pressure. Yeah.
Very interesting comments, and what I will say, I mean, that's not exactly the best way to motivate your team if you are chasing down a top four football, and it's a big boost. Newcastle. I wrote the piece yesterday that it is a massive boost for Newcastle to see your rival's manager essentially saying his players aren't up to it.
If Spurs had anything about them in terms of consistency, we wouldn't be fourth now. They would be fourth and we would be fifth. They get fabulous results like the one against Man City, and then almost inevitably follow it up with a belly flop, which they did at Leicester. And I mean, I'm just grateful for the way they are. They can't produce consistency. By the way, he talks about they can't live with pressure. I mean, has he been to a Spurs Arsenal derby? I mean, has he ever been out to see Newcastle and Sunderland? I know that's in the dim and distant past because Sunderland's disappeared. But it's wrong that. And by the way, I mean, does he put pressure on them or they can't take? I mean, he wasn't there, bless him, because he just had an operation, so I'm not being at all flip. But he missed Man City, didn't he? And the one with his number 2, who might have been a Takama. And when he come back at Leicester, they were heavily hammered. I mean, I'm grateful for the fact that they can't string things together. We went to Spurs and won. And be out of it now if Spurs had absolutely anything about them, but they haven't.
What do you think he's trying to do there? Because that approach.
He's trying to say it's not his fault.
You think? Because I was going to say, you would never see Eddie Howe doing that publicly. Even if he felt it, you would never see Eddie Howe coming out.
Not in the least.
So why
Eddie Howe's strength for me, Andrew, is he's very protective of his players, and his players love him for it, and they know they're not going to get thrown under the bus, even when they do things wrong. I'm sure he'd go in the dressing room and sort out a couple of people on the 2 corner goals Newcastle have given away in the last 2 matches. But he ain't going to go and he won't go in public and do it. He doesn't throw players under the bus. Managers that do quickly lose the great respect of the team. Now, Conte is in danger of doing that. The biggest one was Jones at Southampton, wasn't it? He threw his players under the bus well and truly. Bottom line, he gets thrown under the bus permanently. So I don't think it works to do it that way. Not in the least. But every manager has a different way of doing it, and he goes about with his heart on his sleeve. And when they win, everybody says one of the greatest managers in the world. And when they don't, they say, stop blaming everybody instead of yourself. But Klopp's going through that at the moment, isn't he? He was the greatest manager in the world until this season.
Well, it certainly didn't work, given they got beat off AC Milan in the Champions League. And it's going to be interesting to see if it gets the desired positive effect, I'm sure, that Conte was after. Back to Newcastle, Liverpool then, John.
Yep.
Let's run through your team. Again, I will say it again, this is your team, not what Eddie Howe will do. Let's go for your team first, and then we'll decide what we think Eddie Howe will do.
It's so difficult, Andrew, because we don't know for certain who's fit. And
that is very true.
And there's a lot there. You can say the whole front 3, that's Almiron, Wilson, and Maximum. We don't know 100% that all 3 will be fit and will play. And then there's Willock in midfield, and there's Bruno already out of midfield. So there's 5 key players when you leave the back alone that we don't know anything about. I mean, what's very interesting is that what happens in midfield. I would like to see, to a certain extent, and I don't know how this can be achieved, Andrew, but I would like to see Anthony Gordon start. Somewhere along the line, I would like to see Anthony Gordon start. Now, the one thing that Eddie's not going to do is, we've already said that he won't rest players for the cup final. He's certainly not going to drop players that have earned a cup final place. I mean, I thought Dan Burn was horrendous last week. And that display of a left back who is not essentially a left back would normally see him drop the next week at any other club. You're not going to drop Dan Burn 1 week before a cup final and knock all the stuffing out of him completely. That's not going to happen. So I think the back four will be the back four and the keeper will be the keeper. And Longstaff and Joe Linton are knocking bets for the middle of the park. And it's just a matter of who's the third one. Is it going to be Elliot Anderson? Or can you rejig it somehow and play Gordon in the role he come on and played at Bournemouth, where he plays as like a 10 behind your centre forward?
I would love it to be Elliot Anderson, but I think it's probably more likely to be Anthony Gordon in for Joe Willock, I would think.
I would like to play Joe Willock, and I don't know that the way Newcastle United are playing at the moment, and the fact that it's against Liverpool a week before the cup final, when we're short of, you want Anderson to go in with Joe Linton and Bruno, don't you? To give him a real chance of making an impression, not in a weakened midfield. I would like to see Anthony Gordon start as the third midfielder. He wouldn't be exactly a midfielder, and it would be a little tweak and a little this. But I think you would go Wilson, Almiron, and Maximum. I don't think he's going to drop Sam Maximum a week before Wembley. I don't think he'll start at Wembley because Bruno's back. But I don't think you would fill him full of disappointment in whatever the week before the cup final. So I think the front three will be the front three if they're fit. And I would bring in Gordon to play in place of Willock in a rejigged side.
Yeah, Graham says he'd play 4-2-3-1, Longstaff and Joe Linton with Anderson, either number 10 or on the left, and with Gordon as well in that midfield. We've said it the past few weeks, Elliot Anderson hasn't looked out of place, so his time is going to come sooner rather than later, and it might be the right time to do so on Saturday. We talk a lot about momentum, John. Just how important is it that Newcastle beat Liverpool on Saturday, not only to maintain their place in the top four, but also to go into the Wembley weekend?
Well, we've kept saying must win, must win. It's getting to be silly now, isn't it? But the more you don't win, the more the next game is must win. But yes, not only do we want revenge against Liverpool, not only do we require it to cement with top four position, with Spurs dithering around the way they are, but it sets the mood for the cup final. If we beat Liverpool, the clouds are blown away and we march on Wembley. If it's the 6 drawn 7 games, we say, well, we're hard to beat, but there's a slight doubt in your mind. The one thing we do not want to do is go to Wembley with a home defeat to Liverpool the previous week. That would shatter everything. So it is massive. And I'm just so desperate for us to win. I'm desperate for us to win all the time because of the Champions League. But I'm desperate on Saturday because it's Liverpool who deserve it, what's coming to them after the game at Anfield, and because it's 1 week before Wembley. This is must win. Just plucked that out there. Never heard that expression before. But want to win, desperately want to win for all the reasons we've just talked about.
Yeah, fingers crossed to do. I'll get your result prediction in a moment. Let me just push our Wembley special up for the cup supplement. It's out now. It should be in your local garages and news agents, so you can pick one up in person or you can order online. £3 it costs. Can get delivered worldwide. I'll pop the link to where you can do that. If you want to buy it online, I'll pop the link into the comments and in the description. Do click on it. Loads of fantastic stuff in there. Myself and John written a few pieces, as has Lee, Ryder, Aaron Stokes, Kieran Kelly, Supermac as well. So one not to be missed. And I'll just point you as well in the direction of this. The Everything is Black and White podcast live in London. We've got 2 live events. One at the Dolphins already sold out. This one at the Nag's Head is not ticketed, but we expect it to be very busy. Nag's Head is in Covent Garden on James Street. We'll be there from 6 p.m. for about an hour or so, and then we'll walk along to Trafalgar Square. But if you need somewhere to be on that Saturday evening, come along to the Nag's Head and come and see the team. Right, John. How is Saturday, Newcastle versus Liverpool, going to go?
I mean, I don't know why you asked me, because I've got it wrong all the time. I've kept saying Newcastle will win when they were playing Bournemouth. I said they'd win when they were playing Leeds. I said they'd win when they were playing West Ham. Only thing is they didn't. But you don't think I'm going to say they're going to draw with Liverpool, because that's what they do all the time. 1 week before we go to Wembley. No, they're going to win. Or they have to win. We have to win. Surely the little bit more push for revenge, for the mood before we go to Wembley. Get the adrenaline going again. Let's go and win it. Perhaps the fact that Liverpool are Liverpool as well, a big club, regardless of how they're playing this season, instead of being a Bournemouth, instead of being a Crystal Palace, instead of being a Leeds or everybody else that's drawn a West Ham, drawn up here, they're a bigger named club than all them. Perhaps that'll help stir us as well. So I'm taking the narrowest of victories. I've said that for about 6 successive weeks. I've got to be right at some stage. I'm saying it more with my heart than my head, but that is so important to us, and that will change everything if it happens. So I've got to go with it again and say narrow Newcastle victory.
I think they're going to win. I think they're going to beat Liverpool, and I think I'm going to go for. I'm even going to throw in a score prediction, John. I know we don't usually do it, but I'm going to do it.
Good.
I'm going to go for a 2-0 victory over Liverpool on Saturday. I'm feeling good. I'm thinking the atmosphere, evening kickoff under the lights in James's Park, the crowd. I think everything just kind of plays into Newcastle's hands here, and I think Newcastle will win and go into that Wembley week full of confidence. A few last comments here. Roger says Sir Maximin likes to play against bigger clubs. Everyone will point at that Man City performance before he picked up the injury the week a few weeks later. Obviously, he got that goal against Wolves, didn't he? Then was injured. So yeah, maybe have a point there. Roger also says the supplement is a great read. So there's Roger's seal of approval. So if you haven't got it yet, go out and get it. We've got Ian asking, can you get it delivered to Australia? You can. Worldwide shipping is available. So get ordering that. Gordon says it would be a great boost of belief for the players to beat Liverpool the week before we play Man United. Newcastle would feel unstoppable. Yep, all goes back to that momentum, which is dead important. What I want to ask you, John, finally, it's going to sound a bit of a bizarre question. So I apologise to you and I apologise to our listeners and viewers.
Okay.
Newcastle United seem in a bit of a rut at the moment. You know, they've drawn, they've won 1 in the last 6. They've drawn 5 of the last 6, haven't they?
5 out of 6.
Yeah. If they lost a game, and I'm not specifically talking about this one, especially not this one, but if they lost, say if they got beat off Bournemouth, for example, do you think that would remove? I don't know if pressure is the right word.
The tension.
Yeah. Would you think it would remove something, and then it would restart them the week after?
No, I don't want to go down that road, because I'm not a believer of that, and I think that would put even more pressure on us. I mean, not this week. You were right, because you don't want to lose before you go to Wembley. But no, I don't think. I know where you're coming from. The theory of turning the top off the bottle of pop, that you've shook, and it looks as if it's going to explode. Release the tension, and there you go. But you know what will release the tension and get them all going again? A win. That's what will release the tension. You beat Liverpool, they won't be tired in the next match. The best way, the way to release the tension is not to lose, it's to win. That's the way to do it. They've got to win, not lose. So I'm hoping you're right. And what was said about Liverpool, let us bear one thing in mind. Liverpool are only 9th. But the they're 9th is because of the results at Anfield. At Anfield, they've won 7, drawn 3, and lost only 1. Away from Anfield, they've won 2, drawn 2, and lost 6. That's their away record. They're coming to Newcastle. They've lost their last 3 games on the road, against Brentford, against Brighton, and against Wolves. They've lost 6 out of 10 on the road. So they're beatable. And the best way to get rid of the tension the best way to get rid of the apprehension, the best way to get rid of pre-Wembley nerves is to go out and beat Liverpool. The world will be a sunnier place. It wasn't to go down to Bournemouth and lose, because then you cut your throat.
Yeah. And just finally, John, the next time you'll be on the podcast, we'll be previewing that Wembley final. Very exciting stuff.
That is, and let's hope we're previewing it. We'll have a bouncing with step because it'll be towards the end of next week, and we'll be so looking forward to Wembley. It's untrue, but let's just think about having beaten Liverpool and going down there and thinking, hey, this is a proper opportunity. And I remember going in 74 with not much hope, and going in 98 with not much hope, and going in 99 and not much hope. The one I left out was the League Cup final when we did quite well. But the others, you had the feeling that unless they got a bloke sent off or they scored 2 own goals, we would struggle. That's not the case this time. If Rashworth wants to get a bit of a knock in training and perhaps feels that he can't play in the cup final, well, I'll be quite happy for that. But let's talk about it next week. We'll talk about it optimistically, and we'll be very optimistic if we've beaten Liverpool, which is what we both forecast us to do. So it's quite easy now, isn't it? You just go out for an hour and a half and beat Liverpool. Job's done. Job's a good one.
All that needs to be done. Well, this has been Everything is Black and White podcast. Thank you very much to John for coming on to the match preview as usual. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button on your podcast platform as well. Leave us a rating and review. Go out and buy this supplement as well. It's going to be a souvenir edition because
absolutely
we're off to Wembley. So go out and get that ordered. Go out to your garage and get it as well. And head over to chroniclelive.co.uk to keep up to date with all the latest Newcastle United news, including the press conferences on Friday from Jurgen Klopp and, of course, Eddie